Okay, I've reset up the beginning of Battle Axe Brazen Chariots. Essentially because obviously for those of you who've just persevered through all of those little videos, and a big thank you for doing so, and a huge thank you for all the kind comments and discussions that it sparked. Um, Somebody suggested producing a video afterwards just to kind of go through the errors that crept in, and obviously there are mistakes. So that's exactly what this is. It's just an attempt to kind of like look at some of the things and go, yeah, okay, let's have a little look at that. I'm not going to kind of go through and try and correct or anything. You can't correct really. It's the point of getting it right in the first place. And to be honest, the best thing in the world is keep playing the games. I feel more comfortable with BCS now than I probably ever have, and it's because well, I've now gone through two campaigns, the one that you've all watched, and I also have one coming up, which is Baptism by Fire. Now, I've done baptism in a different way in that the videos are just turn by turn, really, and the video just shows you where the units got to through that turn. So, it might not be what everybody wants to look at. It's just I thought I would try a different way, see what comments I get, see what feedback I get, and, that might determine kind of how I go. I have to say as well, I still have a big love of OCS, and I'm kind of torn between the two systems. As I kind of said again in a comment, one of the things that probably pushes me more towards BCS these days is it feels a lot lighter to play, even though I think it's a great reflection of what it's trying to simulate. You can sit down with an OCS game and you can be looking at losing a good chunk of time going through all the units that you need to move and the supply that you need to work out. Because you play BCS formation at a time, it just kind of lifts it a little bit. It feels a little bit lighter to play. So that will suit some people's playing styles more than OCS, I suppose. Having said that, as I said, I've just recently finished a game of the last Blitzkrieg. And I have a lot of comments about the game, which I think I would like to address. But whether that's something I ever set up as a playthrough, or whether it's just maybe a discussion, I'll do that at a future date, I'm sure. So back to, well, actually, just reflecting on what I've just said about mistakes, and this is just completely and utterly me. I have this absolute foible about putting combat trains onto tracks. I don't know where it came into my gameplay. I just don't seem to be able to fully shake it off. A lot of the time, I think I get things right. Just every now and again, I just catch myself, or I don't catch myself. I put a combat train on a track, thinking I can. So I can only apologise for it. I'm pretty sure when we come to watch, or when you come to watch, if you do, the Baptism by Fire videos, I do exactly the same in that with a couple of formations. I guess, I mean, maybe it is just that gamer thing. You're always trying to get things optimized as best you can, and obviously one of the big things is getting your combat trains to be an optimal distance. Just gives you that extra +1 on your snafu. You feel a bit more comfortable. It might just be something as simple as that makes me do it, but you can't. So don't follow my example. Combat trains must be on a primary or secondary road. I did often think that maybe that was the thing, that actually, you look at a map like this and you kind of go primary, secondary, okay, and before you know it, you've done it. Especially with baptism, which to be fair was probably the one that I learned on. There are no primary roads. There are only a road and a track. And I think maybe subconsciously that was kind of part of the issue. But it's not an excuse. Do it correctly. Primary, secondary roads only. Interestingly, when I'm saying about trying desperately to get your combat trains into optimum distance to get the +1, the other thing to bear in mind in the game-specific rules for Brazen Chariots, you can't be anything but optimal in this game. If the distance from your headquarters to your combat train is greater than 15, it's illegal. So you can't do it. Again, it's one of those little nuance elements. And expanding upon it, I suppose the other one to mention is there's no crossing the streams, which again, if you're familiar with battalion combat series, if two formations, well, if we look at here, let's say for argument's sake we weren't playing Brazen Chariot, and we were using this HQ tracking down these tracks and roads to a combat train, and this formation tracking down tracks to a road and combat train, ordinarily that would be crossing the streams. Now, whether it's because in Brazen Chariots a third nuance is we are actually allowed to track through open terrain, I guess it's more, there are more options, there are more routes available, so there are no crossing the streams in this game at all. Yeah, subtle flavour, unique to the Western Desert perhaps, but there you go. So yeah, that was one of the big ones, and as I said, I mean, it's an issue I have. It's a personal issue that I have. I cannot stop myself from putting every now and again a combat train onto a track. Bear with me, I'll get there in the end. So the other one that we came across was engagement zones. So you'll see here on the map what I've done is I've kind of set up these cubes just to illustrate again where the engagement zones are across the map. And yeah, what I've tried to show also is the effect that terrain has on the engagement zones. So you can see it's out to 2 hexes. So wherever there's an 88, which is standoff support from a unit, we have this engagement zone. So Frontier's headquarters is in there with a combat unit. It has 88s in support. So wherever there's a Frontier unit, you have the 88s zone. Here again, zone. Here again, zone. In terms of blocking terrain, because there is line of sight affecting the engagement zone, you'll notice here that it's only in that hex because that is blocking terrain. So in other words, 2 hexes would put it there. But because of that blocking terrain, it would only be adjacent. Where you have blocking terrain hex next to open terrain hex, it remains clear. So in other words, the hex side between a blocking terrain and a clear terrain does not block. Engagement zone. In here, if you go to this guy, we have a rise along here, the Hafid Ridge. Again, because of the position of that unit, he isn't adjacent to the rise, so the rise is a block. So 2 hexes engagement zone would normally be along there, but because of the rise, it's blocked. It's only there. So you could drive to there in a truck and you'd be fine, because that's one of the differences, and it's the difference that somebody quite rightly picked up on. It's about movement class. OCS players will probably be familiar with this, that trucks always have issues compared to mechanized units, which mechanized unit in this game is what we call a TAC, so the red tactical movement unit, as opposed to the black movement allowance, a truck movement, and as opposed to, he clumsily tried to take the unit off there, the white movement allowance of a leg unit. So to give us an example, the supported units, our leg unit could move a half, 1, a half, 2 and a half, no problem at all. Our tank unit can move 1, 2, 3, 4, no problem at all. Our truck unit could only ever, and I don't want to use that because that's a headquarters and that's different again. So if I just flip him, 1, 2, 3, 4, we would have to stop. The thing that the thing that I've looked at with this is, how would you play it? Well, you can kind of see there. I mean, I've just moved those 2 units up. Um, there are locations where you could still do this in the first activation. The other option, obviously, to bear in mind as a Commonwealth player, is all of these units are fresh. Don't put an objective down on your first activation. Just move the units up a little bit through the desert and hope that because you are fresh, you'll be adding 1 to the activation roll. So in other words, these would only fail a second activation on a 1 or a 2. 3 or more, you've got a second activation. Guards, the 22nd Guards, slightly worse because it's a 5. But again, keeping it fresh, it's 50-50. 4, 5, 6, you'll have a second activation. Initially, that was one of my concerns, was it felt like it was really harsh. It's the start of a British offensive, and I was worried that you weren't even going to get into grips or get to combat with the outlying Axis units. Obviously, that kind of shows you can. It is more limited than I thought it was, but I still think it's entirely doable. The other thing to just bear in mind, which I didn't do in the game, but again from a player's point of view, you might want to look at this, is actually using, because if you are going up against the 88s, which are obviously a value of 4 against plus the value of the defending unit, which is also a 4, so you're going up against 8s. Your Matildas are Matilda at best there is 5. 5 against 8 minus 3, you'll probably get a +1. Well, presuming you get full activations, you'll get a +1 for the double tap. That still gives you a -2 to try and drop support. Now, it's not the end of the world, because you will drop support on a 6 to an 8 on the engagement table. But sometimes you might want to just look at it slightly differently, I don't know. Roll the dice and just throw the infantry in there without dropping the support. So what additions could you do to help that situation? And obviously one of them is to support your infantry. Now, generally speaking, Commonwealth units, we don't have really anything. You kind of look along and you can kind of see we don't really have much to support the infantry with. And I was looking at it and getting all excited, thinking, all right then, so what can we use for support? Well, the Matildas we can. So you could, as I've just indicated on that there, we could stack that with the HQ and have it in support, which would give us a red support. Red support is the only support which adds the support bonus in attack. The others don't. So your limited AT guns aren't going to add you anything to a situation where you're attacking. Having said that, when you look at this setup here, I believe the Indians who come in over here, they have Matildas, so they could be in support. That would give you that +1. You've got 2 units of Matildas here, so you could keep 1 to try and drop support with. You could use the other in support to give you the bonus on the infantry attack. The problem then goes 7th Armoured. Now, again, I haven't looked this up, but I have a notion, because this was the Tiger Cub convoy that came across. This is where all these new tanks came to actually do this offensive in the first place. And I think, off the top of my head, I'm going to say 4th RTR, and you can all shout at me again in the comments, no problem at all. But I think 4th RTR were Stuarts, the honeys as the Brits called them. So just be careful of that, because the only 2 Commonwealth vehicles that can be put into support in Brazen Chariots are the Matildas and these fellas, the Valentines. Now again, you can see they aren't great. Yeah, we weren't producing fabulous tanks at this time. But Valentines, Matildas are the only 2 that can be used in support. And in this scenario, in Battle Axe, there are no Valentines, so that makes it quite simple. Matildas only. But yeah, it's an option because you do still have those two options. You know, I think it's a bit like people talk about prep def, and prep def's the only way you can kind of hold on onto terrain. And there's a sort of feeling that if you're defending that and you're instantly putting units into prep def has very definite negatives. Now, 2.0 rules, it might be helped a little bit because my understanding at the moment is that prep def will no longer be a single activation. You'll have two possible activations. And if we were playing last Blitzkrieg, some of those American divisions with hordes of artillery are going to be putting a world of hurt on units with two activations. So, you know, see what happens. But certainly, as the game goes at the moment, from an attack point of view, you do have the option of not dropping the support and trying to take the position anyway. The difference being that, you know, the enemy unit, if you drop the support, won't have a +1. It's a possibility. It's worth thinking about and trying. I'm sure we'll all get used to doing things how we prefer. Okay, thanks again for watching the videos. Thanks again for all your comments. Absolutely brilliant. Hope you're all enjoying Battalion Combat System. Look forward to further comments and speaking to you all soon. Cheers.